Hey everyone, welcome back to Game Over Ottawa. Our off-season preview continues here today with a look at the Senators' defense core and what they should be doing with it this summer. Just a reminder to everyone, we will be doing our live post-game shows for every Ottawa Senators game coming up this season. So be sure to subscribe for that if you're not already. Come hang out in the live chats. We'd love to have really interactive experience with the audience. That's what we're going to be mostly doing on this channel. But for now, fill in time in the off season with lots to talk about. So getting into the topic of the defense here today, Charlie, we got to go right into Jakob Chychrun right away, don't we? With that expiring contract.
Yeah, I don't want to put too much thought into because a lot of people are saying he's going to get traded, and a lot of that is coming from the end of season interviews where he was just asked point blank, like, "Are you going to resign?" He was like, "I don't know. We're going to find out. We'll see." And he didn't seem like he didn't seem too excited by the idea of sticking around, but I think like they were all pretty pissed off for the season, so I don't want to read into it too much, but it's definitely worth thinking about. Because I don't know. I mean, again, going back to a lot of discussions we've had, we don't exactly know how this management team works as far as how much they like the idea of risking UFAs walking for nothing. So I think this is going to be a really interesting test for them right off the bat, to see how they handle a big name on an expiring contract, see how it goes. But I definitely think a trade is. I don't know if I want to say likely, but I maybe likely. Maybe I should just say likely and stop talking. I don't know. I'm just nervous about it, honestly.
Yeah, with what you said about us not really knowing the management team's philosophy in terms of taking a big name player into the season on the last year of their deal, I suppose it is possible that we could see Chychrun play some more games for the Sens if other teams don't offer anything that Steve Staios likes, and maybe he'll give Chychrun another shot, see if he can really find his game next season, and maybe become a part of this team's future. But I feel like just as of now, it doesn't really feel like he's going to be. And apart from him sounding kind of lukewarm on whether or not he wants to re-sign here, I feel like a lot of fans are lukewarm on whether or not they actually want to see him re-sign too, because it just feels like the balance of the decor isn't there. It's a lot of puck movers, it's a lot of left-hand shots, and that's really the main thing that we're going to get into today, is that we need right-hand shots. So since he's on an expiring contract, he just kind of seems like the obvious guy to move out.
Yeah, out of anyone that you can get a return on, definitely seems like the most likely person you move out. I mean, he had a rough end to his season, rough second half, really. But you're not going to move Sanderson, and no one's going to be paying too much for Shabbat, just given the injury issues this past season, whether it's because they didn't see enough of him at full health and see what he can still do, or if, there's an actual scare um, with injuries when it comes to Shabbat, if GMs around the league are a little bit worried about that. So yeah, as far as if you're going to shake something up on defense, you're right. He's the one that's going to be moved. So. Um, we can talk about, where we can see him going. We talked about him a little bit on the last episode about goaltending, just because we had a couple of discussions about like trading for a goaltender, and he was just kind of the first big piece that could be traded that's worth something to be thrown into that mix. So we've talked about that a little bit, but do you have any thought of great trade ideas for him, or
Yeah,
um
obviously we talked about the Boston possibility. I think that's just an
yeah.
easy one to come up with because he's our biggest trade chip and the goaltending is the biggest need and Olmark is the best goalie available. So you kind of just put all those together and it's like, hey, maybe that makes sense. That is something that I would be interested in doing, Chicken for Olmark potentially. But as you were saying in the last episode, it could be something where we have to add even more than that. And there's the whole question of extending Olmark as well, and potentially as well whether or not Chychrun would want to extend in Boston. Although that's probably a pretty easy sell for most players, considering they're a team that's just always competitive and always near the top of the league. But in terms of other teams that we haven't really discussed yet, I do wonder about Carolina the most. I'm not going to get into what we could potentially receive in return from Carolina yet, but just because it seems like they're probably going to be losing Pesci and Shea maybe just one. Maybe they'll manage to keep one or the other. But the main thing I would think is that if they don't keep Brady Shea, then you've got a bit of a hole on that left side D there. So I could see them being interested in Chychrun, especially since even though they would probably want to extend him, he still has that one more year at what is it, 4.6 million. So that's a pretty good cap hit for that last year on the deal. It is possible that they keep one or maybe two of those D, but they're probably also really trying to save cap to sign Jake Gensel. And
Yeah.
also at the time of this recording, just like 5 minutes ago, they signed Jalen Chatfield, which is another right-hand D option off the market for the Sens. They gave him $3 million, which makes me wonder whether or not they're still trying to sign Pesci or if they think he's going to go to free agency. And they just said, okay, we'll keep Chatfield as the backup option, basically.
Yeah. We'll get into this more specifically later on. We both have a list of players we'd like the Sens to go after in the offseason. And Carolina has a few. Um, yeah, Carolina, as far as a trade partnership goes there with Chychrun, I don't know what you'd be getting back. That's tough. I mean, there's been like some Martin Necas talk as well, about them trying to maybe move on from him for some reason. I don't know why they would, but
Yeah,
there's been talk, and I
that
don't
would
know
be
if I
the
want to
pipe
believe it.
dream. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. But yeah, no, Carolina is definitely a team that could be looking to to rebuild their defense pretty soon here, depending on how things go with them re-signing everybody. Um,
Any other teams you had in
yeah.
mind?
Not really, to be honest with you. I find it's so difficult coming up with trades at this point because just like I find it a lot easier, at the trade deadline just because you kind of know what teams are looking for. And right now, I think the problem is like every team is looking for something, and so it's kind of like I have a tough time narrowing down to like two or three teams that I could see a trade going with because it could be any of like 10 to 15 teams in on someone like Chychrun. That's even if he moves, right? Or maybe, you know what, maybe he's having a fantastic month of June and then he re-signs in the summer and extends or something. I don't know. But yeah, as far as moving Chychrun goes, while I can't really figure out a team that I'd be super psyched on necessarily, just like with what the return would be. I think I also touched on this in the last video as well on goaltending, but definitely would want to see him move for an NHL player, like at the very least coming back. Don't really need more futures. As much as we were talking about in the draft preview, how the cupboards are empty and this team badly needs some top end prospects back in the system. If you're moving out Chychrun, you have to bring back something that's going to help the team today.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
100%.
so, ideally be a team that is looking to move a goalie, or I don't know. It'd be tough to find like a one for one or like anything close to like a hockey trade, like where Chychrun's moved out for a defenseman coming back, because it's tough to find, a team moving out a defenseman where it just happens to be that both teams have a really specific need on defense, and a trade like that would help. So moving him would probably be for a goalie or a forward, I would assume. And then so if we just like, unless you think that there's like a really good D for D kind of trade out there somewhere, we can kind of talk about how by moving Chychrun, all of a sudden you have like this huge hole on defense that you need to fill. Um, and how to go about addressing that, probably through free agency, I would assume. Um, don't know how many trades there are for top four quality defensemen. Just because it's so tough to acquire them. We've seen that with the price that the Sens paid for Chychrun like a year and a half ago, not even. Um, oh God, we're gonna be comparing this. This is to brink it all over again. We're gonna be
It is.
comparing the price. Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
um,
Ugh.
yeah, in terms of a D for D trade, that is really tough just in this specific scenario because I don't think really any teams are looking to trade a right-hand D for a left-hand D, right? And that's what we
Yeah,
need is that right-hander. One thing to consider is with all of there's like a pretty good crop of right-hand D available in free agency. Now, all the teams are going to be after them pretty much, so it's possible that the Sens don't get any of the guys that they want in free agency, but you could possibly look for a trade after all the dust settles on free agency. And if you still have Chychrun at that point, you haven't already made a trade. It could be that some teams have added new right-hand D, and then maybe they're willing to move someone else on their team who they want to give that ice time to, right? Like if a team signs Brett Pesce and then all of a sudden the guy who was on their second right-handed D pair, he's all of a sudden he's not going to be getting that much ice time anymore. Maybe they want to move out his cap hit. Maybe there could be a situation like that. I think if we were to do a D for D trade, it would probably be later in the summer after the dust settles on free agency. But it's really tough to come up with an idea like that for now before we see how all that plays out.
Yeah, and to your point about finding someone to play that right side, I was shouting all season long last year that I wanted to see Chychrun get more time on the right. It felt he was playing on the right side of Thomas Chabot like a decent amount, but it never felt like he had a whole bunch of games there in a row. Like they'd be jumbling up the defense pairings, and he never really got a chance to really get comfortable there. I have natural stat trick up here just because I wanted to look at the pairing ice time for the Sens this season.
Mhm.
And Chychrun played on the right side of Thomas Chabot. It looks like a total of 240. No, that's the wrong pairing. Where am I here? 342 minutes. Um, but then you compare that to his most common D partner was Jacob Bernard Docker, where he was playing with him for 433 minutes. He also played 273 minutes with Hamonic, so
Oh
Hamonic being
God.
right-handed, Bernard Docker being right-handed.
Yeah,
And then following that, we've got him with Brandstrom when Brandstrom would have been the one playing on the right side on that pairing, I believe.
I think so.
Um, so out of his total ice time, he really didn't get to play too much on the right side. And with his shot, I so badly wanted to see a good 15 game run of him playing on the right side of Thomas Chabot. Obviously, that is difficult to do with Chabot's injury, so I kind of get that to an extent. And Sanderson-Zub looked so good together, so I understand why they didn't want to split that up. But it is risky going into the season on an expiring deal, but I still think that Chychrun can be a really effective defenseman on that right side. If there's a lot of ifs here, if Chabot stays healthy, and they can get like a consistent pair with the two of them, tough to imagine a season where Chabot and Chychrun both stay healthy just because of their histories. Um, but I do really think that there's a really good shot of them sticking together and being a really solid, really solid second pair behind a Sanderson-Zub top pair. Um, I don't know. It's risky going into it with only 1 year left on that contract. I really wanted to see that a lot last season, and we just didn't get to see it. I still think that with that shot, Chychrun can be a really effective offensive player on that right side. Um, but then you have to wonder with Chabot and Chychrun, like there really isn't a shutdown player on that pairing, and that's what the Sens desperately need right now. So, maybe just to play a little bit of devil's advocate, even though I am a fan of Jakob Chychrun, I am maybe moving him and replacing him with a top tier right-handed shutdown type of player, if you can get your hands on that, is the smart move. I don't know I don't know if you have any opinion at all on testing Chychrun out for a longer period of time on the right side at all. Just as I don't know, I guess a doing nothing attempt at a solution, but
Yeah,
um
if they can't get a good trade return for him, I wouldn't be opposed to that, especially like I like how you brought up his most common D partners because the one thing you can give him some leeway on is that playing most of the season with Bernard Docker and Hamonic as your partners is just not ideal. We're talking
yeah.
about how the team needs a shutdown right-handed D. Chychrun would have benefited from having that this season for sure. So maybe he's a guy that you move out, not necessarily to get one of those right D back in a trade because you might not be able to, but just to move the
Yeah.
cap and then spend that money on a right-handed D. He might just end up being a casualty in that regard. But yeah, if they do end up keeping him, I agree that I'd like to see more of him on the right hand side. And you mentioned Shabbat's health too. That makes it interesting as well because if he's constantly missing a bunch of games again, and Chychrun is off the team, then it's probably Eric Brandstrom moving up into the top four, which is not the worst thing ever. But if you still have Chychrun and then slide him back to that left side when Shabbat's out of
Mhm.
the lineup, that's obviously way better depth. But I think it would just be more ideal to kind of even out the right and the left sides more.
Yeah. So on that, let's just take a look at what the defense is right now. Chikrin's on an expiring contract. Hamonic is on an expiring contract with a no move clause. So for those of you who didn't know that already, who any casual Sens fans out there who, you know, touched grass and weren't ruining their day over the fact that Travis Hamonic has a no move clause. He has that, so he can't send him down. So as it currently stands, the only defenseman that needs to be re-signed is Eric Brandstrom, who is currently a restricted free agent. Um, don't know what the plan is there. They might be looking at, moving his rights in the trade as well. We'll see. He has not exactly been the coach's favorite between DJ Smith or I think Jacques Martin probably liked him a little bit more than DJ Smith, but um, another thing to keep in mind is just what Travis Green wants to do, and how he would go about it. And is he going to have a say in whether or not Brandstrom is re-signed? Is he going to have any influence on who's signed and how they're playing him? Like if Steve Staios says like, hey, if I re-sign Brandstrom, you're going to play him, and Travis Green's like, nope, then there's going to be an issue there, right? So Brandstrom's the only one who is not currently under contract out of the most consistent players on D last season. Um, I guess I'll just go through it like this. So Sanderson-Zub, how do you feel about keeping them together as a pair? Because that was the pair with the most ice time for the Sens by a lot. Like Sanderson and Zub at 5v5 had 824 minutes of ice time. The next highest was 433 between Chychrun and Bernard Docker. So like Sanderson and Zub was by far the most consistent pair we saw 5v5. Are you happy with that as a pair, sticking with that going into next season?
It's definitely a case of if it's not broke, don't fix it. You
Sure.
definitely plan to start with that pairing, and then if it doesn't do as well as last year, you can switch it up if needed. Do you happen to have like their goal share stats open there with the ice time? Because I'm wondering how good it was. We know that it was by far the Sens' best D pairing, but since the Sens are not that good of a team, I do wonder. I wonder how good of a pairing it was
Yeah. You're
throughout
just
the whole
looking for
league,
the
basically.
yeah, the goal for percentage here.
Mm-hmm.
So the top with I'll say the top with that cracked triple digits in minutes was actually Chychrun and Brandstrom
Oh
at
wow. How many minutes for them?
55.5%, 156.
Okay. Small sample
But
size.
Sanderson and Zub were at 52.7, which outside of the guys who played together for 18 minutes, actually, Brandstrom and Sanderson at 42 minutes have 100, and Brandstrom and Gannett at 18 minutes have 100%.
Oh my god.
So, but obviously those numbers are too low. At 100 and yeah, oh no, oh my goodness. Bernard Docker and Sanderson, 143 minutes, 75% goals for.
That's insane.
That's nuts.
I wonder why they didn't try it more often then. I wonder
Yeah,
which games they played together in.
that's interesting. You put those two I mean, maybe that's the secret to unlocking Bernard Docker. Then you put Zub with Shabbat again. I don't know. I don't know. But can I set like a minimum ice time? I don't know if I can.
I did a
Oh
quick
yeah, here we go.
oh yeah, what do you got?
I have a minimum ice time set that I can do.
Okay.
If I set it to like 150, or I mean, maybe even 200 minutes. If I set a minimum of 200 minutes, then the best one, yeah, would be Sanderson Zub at 52. And then there's a drop off to, oh no, that's not true. Shabbat Brandstrom, 58.8.
Hmm.
So Shabbat Brandstrom, I mean, Brandstrom playing on the right side of Shabbat. If again, like you said, if you move Chychrun and then you need to move Brandstrom into that top four, it's not the end of the world. Clearly, he and Shabbat have played well together, with 240 minutes of 5v5. Um, but
I
it's
pulled up
it's it's tough to know.
I pulled up Money Puck's numbers for the whole league and I did minimum 300 minutes ice time.
There
And
you go.
for all D pairings, Sanderson and Zub ranked 17th for expected goals for percentage. So
Okay.
that's the expected goals and not the like actual goal share. But
Right.
for 828 minutes together, that's quite good because a lot of the D pairings ahead of them are like under 400 minutes. So if you raise the minimum threshold way up
Yeah.
to like 500 or something, then they start climbing up and getting closer to the top 10. So that's pretty damn good, I would say.
What's really surprising actually is I'm looking at the actual goal share versus expected. When you set it to 200 minutes or more, the only pairing that actually outperformed the expected was Hamnick and Chychrun.
Oh my god.
Expected 44, actual is 46.6.
I guess that makes
Everyone
sense.
else was below the expected goals for percentage.
That probably part
Weirdly
of that
enough.
is that the expected it was probably just bad for any pairing with Hamonic. Like you just expect it to be bad, right? So the fact that it
That's
wasn't
true, yeah.
too bad, maybe that props it up a little bit. It
That's
could be.
funny. Yeah.
You know what? And I just changed it from the expected goals to the actual goal share. And when
Yeah.
you, I guess it's sorting by games right now. Let me change the goal share. They let me change the sorting. They fall down a little bit to being ranked about like as the 30th best pairing, but it's still 52.1%, which is probably by far the best on the team. So
Yeah.
and that's still in the top 30 pairings in the league. And there's probably also like some teams that have multiple pairings in the top 30,
Oh, for
like both
sure.
their first and second pairing. Like Carolina has Orlov and Chatfield and Slavin and Burns both in the top. So those like division leading teams are going to have all of their top four near the
Yeah.
top. So the fact that a bad team in Ottawa last year has their top pairing near the top 30 in terms of that, I think that's very good.
Yeah. It feels like that's the makings of a legitimate top pair in the NHL, right? Like it feels like
Definitely.
for sure. So I think if you stick Sanderson-Zub at the top, and then what's the move then? I guess you move out Chychrun and you try and find someone to play with Shabbat and just hope that Shabbat stays healthy. You find someone to play with that right side on the second pair, and then I don't know. I think you keep Brandstrom, and if he can play on the right side, you say cool. But I mean, we also don't know how much of a stickler Travis Green is for as far as like the actual left right
hmm
on defense. I have no idea. Um, Hamnick, I guess you're stuck with him as your seventh, no matter what.
I think Hamonic could get bought out because I think it would be a pretty cheap. It wouldn't be much of a penalty. He's a small contract. I could see them wanting to save a tiny bit of cap with that and just moving on from him.
Mhm. I could see that too. Yeah.
Especially because
Um,
he has a no move clause, which, if I remember correctly, also applies to like if you get put on waivers, right? So I don't think they can just bury him in the minors. He could decline that, could decline going
yeah.
to Belleville. So I think a buyout could be likely, unless Steos and the new coach and Travis Green like Hamonic and want him in their top six, which hopefully not. Hopefully not. I'll
We'll
say.
see. Yeah, buying him out, it's a $366,000 hit on the cap for the next 2 years.
Yeah, which is pretty good. That's pretty
That's not
decent.
bad. That's not bad. You can work with that.
Saves you like 800K for this year.
Yeah,
That's a league
not
min
bad.
contract right there.
There you go.
So yeah, in
And we
terms
know
of
and we know the
the
team was struggling fitting those in last season, so
they were, that's right. Oh my
yeah.
god. Hopefully we don't end up in that mess again.
Oh
But
my
yeah, in
God.
terms of the layout of the defense, I would say Sanderson and Zub, Shabbat and a new guy, and then maybe branch from Kleben and Bernard Docker as the seventh D, or
Yeah.
maybe also another free agent, maybe a left defenseman free agent, and move and have Branstrom on the
Yeah.
right hand side as well. I would say
Yeah.
something like that. But do you want to get into guys that we would like to see the Sens bring in for that empty spot on the right hand side?
Sure. Yeah, let's get into it. So I have five names. I don't know how many you have.
I did a top
Um,
five, and then I
okay.
also wrote down like a couple of not so likely, but I got a top
I have a
five.
couple, yeah, I have a couple that I think are almost definitely going to be re-signed. Do you want to hit me with your first name and I'll tell you if that person's also on my list?
Okay, so this is, I guess I didn't really rank them one through five, but I can come up with that on the fly. Um,
Sure.
I would say number one target is DeMello.
Okay, yeah, he's on my list as
Do you
well.
have
And
him as
and I
number
have him
one,
like
or do you have him lower?
I have him number 4 purely because I think he's going to be re-signed.
Okay, you think he will stay with Winnipeg? I
I
have
think he
him.
will.
I have him number one just because of the hopium that he maybe he liked it here, and if we give him like the most lucrative offer that he gets over any other team, that he'll be like, oh yeah, I liked
Right.
Ottawa, I'll go back there. But that's just me wishing. That's me wishing as a fan. So I think your opinion that he's likely to re-sign with Winnipeg, I think that
Yeah.
there's a good chance that
Because
happens too.
if you look at Winnipeg, they got 13 and a half in cap space right now. They have to re-sign. Who are the big names they have to re-sign? They have Cole Perfetti's an RFA. Then they got UFAs on forward. They have Monahan and Toffoli. On defense, they've got Logan Stanley, who's an RFA. Then DeMello, obviously UFA. And then Brendan Dillon and Colin Miller rounding out the UFAs on defense. Hellebuck's locked up forever. And they got a couple goalies who are UFAs. They got Brissot. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens
So
there.
you said
But they got
13
13
mil?
million to play with. Yeah,
Yeah,
13 and a half.
so that's interesting. It depends on whether they want to keep Monahan and Toffoli as long-term pieces, or if they just view them as
Yeah.
purely rentals. Because the other question is, there's a bit of it's kind of up in the air about Nikolai Ehlers' future in Winnipeg. There's a bit of
Yeah.
speculation about
That too.
that. So if he ends up getting moved out in a trade, maybe they would want to be re-signing Monahan and Toffoli to have a bit more scoring on that
Yeah.
second line. If you lose Ehlers, those would be great guys to keep around.
Mhm.
And I feel like, but the thing is, I feel like if you signed both of them, that would eat up most of the 13 million, and you're probably going to be wanting to re-sign either Dillon or DeMello, maybe both. So it'll be interesting
Yeah.
to see whether Winnipeg goes more to re-signing the forwards or re-signing the defense, because it'll be hard to fit all of them into 13 million. If they
For
do end up
sure.
if they do end up moving out Ehlers and they don't take much cap back, that would save them 6 mil. Maybe they move out Ehlers for some picks and prospects, and then they just sign like all their guys. That could be possible too.
They could do that. Yeah, absolutely. And I guess it all depends on how do they want to go about it. Like if they look at someone like Hellebuck, they're like, well, we don't need to prioritize defense. We have Connor Hellebuck. Or maybe they're just looking at Connor Hellebuck and the fact that they can re-sign Dillon and Miller and DeMello and think that, no one's ever going to score on us ever. So, could go either way. I do feel like they're going to re-sign. I think I agree with you. I think they're going to re-sign one of Monahan or Toffoli, and I think they're going to keep DeMello. But he is on my list just because I think he would fit so perfectly with Shabbat.
Yeah.
Um,
We've seen it before. They were really
exactly.
good before.
Yeah.
On a bad
Yeah.
team too, on a worse team than we've seen for the last like 2 years. They
If you
were
can
they were a
believe
good
it.
pairing on a
If
much
you can
worse team.
believe
Yeah,
that.
somehow,
Oh,
which is
yeah.
hilarious.
Yeah, I would love to see DeMello back on the Sens. And then, in a perfect world, maybe they have some cap space and they're going to make the playoffs and they, make a big move and they get even more defensive depth. And then all of a sudden your third pairing is Eric Brandstrom and Dylan DeMello because they acquired a
Oh my
really good
god.
offensive top four right shot defenseman anyway. Um, so just, yeah, I think DeMello would be a great, great fit.
Should I go to number 2 on my list?
Yeah, absolutely.
I put Tanev at number 2, and I'm assuming that he was probably number 1 on your list.
He was number 3 on my
Oh
list.
wow. Okay, so we actually have quite different rankings here.
Yeah.
Maybe we should
So,
have
yeah.
hold on. Maybe we should have started with who we have exempted, because you were saying like DeMello will be re-signed. I will say before we continue that I did not include Pesci and Montour. Pesci, not that I necessarily think he's going to stay in Carolina, but I think he's going to be. I think he's going to get one of the biggest contracts of any of these
He's gonna be
defensemen.
pricey.
And
Yeah.
so, and there's gonna be tons of teams after him. Like I bet Toronto will give him a shit ton of money. They need a right hand D maybe even more than we do.
Yeah.
And I also exempted Brandon Montour because I think he'll stay in Florida. Florida has kind of been the team that has revitalized his career. He's become like a star player in Florida. I think they're gonna keep him.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I didn't,
I didn't
put
put Montour
Pesci
on
and
my list.
Montour. Okay. But
You might
anyway,
notice I didn't mention a different name that is maybe a spoiler there.
okay.
When I say when you said I didn't include Pesci and Montour, and I said I didn't include
You
Montour.
didn't include
Uh,
Montour, which means you did include Pesci. But we'll get to that next.
Yeah.
Before that,
Yeah, we'll
Tanev.
talk some Tanev. You're number 2, eh?
Yes, I put him as number 2. He's also one of the ones that I think is going to be the most sought after. The problem that I would say is that since he just went to a contender at the deadline in Dallas, he might continue cup chasing and
For sure.
prefer a team that's already way up there in the standings. But
Mhm.
if not, he is on the older side, so maybe teams will be not too keen on giving him term or not too keen on giving him a high cap hit, and maybe the Sens could outbid on those other
Mhm.
teams in terms of that. Maybe you could give him a 2 to 3 year deal at kind of an inflated cap hit. And then if it doesn't work out in Ottawa, if we don't become a playoff team, during the course of that contract, you can move him at the deadline, give him that cup chasing chance again. So I do wonder, it depends on how much the top teams are willing to pay Chris Tanev, I would say, because I'm sure
Yeah.
they would all want him on their decor, but just because he's old and he kind of gets injured sometimes, I don't know if he would be everyone's number one choice, but I think he would fit
Yeah.
perfectly in terms of the style that the Sens need.
What's the contract that the Sens signed Chris Tanev to that has you go, ooh,
Too much. What is too much, I would say?
yeah, yeah.
I wouldn't go longer than 3 years. I would say 3 years maximum.
Okay, yeah. Hard
And
agree. Hard
and I
agree.
wouldn't. I think my maximum for cap hit would be 6 million.
Oh, your number's
Which,
higher
yeah,
than mine.
it's high, but
It's gonna be up there though,
it's
right? Like
high. But the
it's
key there is that if the Sens are going to get Tanev, I think they'll have to overpay him. I don't think.
yeah.
I don't think many contenders would pay Tanev 6 million. I think a contender would offer him more in the 4 million range. So that's the one
Colorado's
advantage
gonna
is
sign him
that
for 3. Like
yeah,
you
that's
know,
the one
like it's
advantage that
one
we
of
have
those.
is that we could just fucking overpay someone and convince them to
Yeah.
come here because we're
Yeah.
desperate.
I would love to have Tanev on the team. And yeah, you're right. The age thing is maybe an issue for some teams. Um, just like looking at his numbers as well. Like a bit of a history with some injury problems. He was pretty healthy last season, played a total of, was that 75 games? Um, so not too bad there, but then you go back like 22, 23, played 65, played a full 82 in 21, 22, which is great. But he's the kind of player that fits like when you know you say like what do the Sens really need? Right shot, solid shutdown kind of guy. It's a perfect fit. Um, but you know, again, like you said, yeah, I think you're dead on. Teams are going to be absolutely bidding for this guy. There's going to be a bidding war for Chris Tanev. Um, would love to see him in Ottawa. Um, but
I will say I
we'll
don't think it's
see.
super likely that he would sign here, but
No.
I think that management is going to make a push for him for sure. Um,
Yeah.
and last thing on Tana before we move on, I still had the money puck here open, and I went to
Mm.
look and see where I could find Tanev in the stats that I was looking at, which was the
Oh yeah.
goals percentage. And on Calgary, so before he even went to the better team in Dallas, on a crappy
Yeah.
team in Calgary, 743 minutes on a pairing with Hanifin. They had a 58.3% goal share, which is considerably better than Sanderson and Zub. And when I look
Yeah.
at that pairing, I say Tanev plays kind of similar to Zub, and Hanifin plays kind of similar to Sanderson. So I don't know if you got Tanev, played him with either Sanderson or Shabbat. I feel like stylistically, that's pretty good. The fact that he put up those numbers playing with Hanifin is a good partner, but on a
Oh, for
bad
sure.
team, pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, I want yeah. Yeah, I do think and I do think that, you know, oddly enough, even though, you know, DeMello has clearly enjoyed playing in Canada and even though I do think he's probably going to re-sign with Winnipeg, um like I don't know, I feel like Tanev is more likely than DeMello, as unlikely as Tanev is. So,
The other thing
um
you mentioned Demelo playing in Canada. Tanev spent his whole career in Canada until getting traded to
until
Dallas.
yeah,
So I don't know.
yeah.
Maybe he likes it here. He's been on the West Coast. It's been all Vancouver and
Yeah.
Calgary.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe
He's from Toronto,
he is
so
from Toronto.
maybe he wants to, you know,
But also
not quite go home.
maybe that
Maybe
means that
not quite go home.
the Leafs are going to bring him in then.
Oh my God.
I
I'd
think
be
they tried to.
furious.
I think they tried to at the deadline and it didn't work out.
That would have been a great move. Would have
Yeah.
been a great
Good
move.
thing it didn't happen.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Chris Tanev, and I think he'd be a perfect fit for what Ottawa needs right now. I just yeah, I think he's almost certainly going to hit free agency because he knows he's going to get a bag. I just don't think that I'd be shocked if Ottawa's in his top 5.
Yeah,
by
makes
by the
sense.
end of it, by the time he makes a decision. So we'll
Basically,
see. It's a great dream.
It depends if he wants 6 million by 3 years over here, or if he wants to take less for a contender, which would be a reasonable choice, I would say.
Yeah, I you can't blame him for wanting to do that. Absolutely.
Do you want to get into Pesci since he was not on my list, but he was on your list?
Yeah. I'll just go into this. So my number one is a tie between Brett Pesci and Brady Shea because I
Okay.
think what I'm thinking. So I've looked at Carolina's page pretty closely. Um, if I can just find their page again, Carolina, where
I'm
are you?
surprised you included Brady Shea as a lefty. Does he play the right
Yeah,
side?
I have no idea. He's just really
Okay.
good. That's
He's really
my
good.
main
He's
thing.
really good. All I know is that he shoots left, though.
He's just
So,
really good.
hmm.
So if you look through Carolina's page right now, so Carolina, they have just shy of 24 million in projected cap space. They have 23.8. They have a long list of players that are on expiring deals. Their RFAs include oh, okay. So they have so Martin Necas, Seth Jarvis, Jack Drury, Max Comtois. So Jarvis and Necas are the only ones who are going to be really pulling like, any big numbers. I think they both deserve like solid contracts. They're still apparently talking about moving Necas, which is absolutely wild.
Yeah, that's insane.
Just an embarrassment of riches at Carolina. Um, and then they have Dylan Coughlin on defense for as far as the RFAs go. UFAs, Jake Gensel, Jordan Martinook, Stefan Nason, Ottawa legend, uh, Tara Vinen. Then they've got D'Angelo, Pesci, and Shea on defense. So I think it's safe to assume D'Angelo's gone. We can hope. But then as far even just looking at their numbers, so right, so they have 20, so they have just shy of 24 million, and the big names you want to re-sign are going to be Jarvis, Necas, Gensel, Pesci, and Shea. You
That's a lot of
can't
work. A lot
you
of work to be
can't
done.
sign all of them. So I think what's likely going to happen is they sign Gensel, and I think by the time it's all said and done, they're going to have room for Pesci or Shea,
Mm-hmm.
probably. Um, Pesci is definitely my preferred choice just because of the right shot. Um, but Shea, I don't know. Like it doesn't fix anything because I don't think he's played much on the right side.
It's
He's just
just
such a good
Yeah,
player
it's
is
just
the
that he's
thing.
really good. Like
He's just very good.
if we couldn't get any of the right D, getting Brady Shea and then just telling Thomas Chabot to play the right side, I would not be opposed to that.
Yeah.
But I do also think that Brady Shea is probably the number one left-handed D that would be available.
Yeah.
So he might
It's
be
just
really
yeah.
expensive.
It's just for me, whichever one of the two, those two, unless for some reason Carolina decides not to re-sign Gensel, they just want to keep the most insane decor in the league. That's fine too if they want to go that route. I still think they're going to be a solid team, but I feel like one of Pesci or Shea, if not both, are going to hit free agency, and whichever one of them hits free agency, I would be going after very, very, very hard.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're going to focus on one of them, it'd be Brett Pesci. Um, right defense. As far as this season goes, between the two of them, obviously I understand why you're kind of surprised that I'm so high on Shea, just as far as like a fit with Ottawa, because what is Shea? He's a left-handed scoring defenseman. That's not really a thing that the Sens are missing. He's just really, really good. But yeah, Pesci is like a I don't know how I don't know if it's a perfect comparison because he's just like a better Tanev to an extent, just like right shot, shut down kind of defenseman. He's younger and better, just overall. So whatever you think it's going to cost to overpay Tanev to come to Ottawa,
Yeah, exactly.
Pesci's going to be a whole different. And I do think that between the two of them, I think Pesci's the more likely to go because they're going to be like, uh-oh, do we sign our high scoring defenseman or our shutdown defenseman? Then they're going to look at their lineup and go, oh, Jacob Slavin? Yeah, we can let go of the defensive guy. So
Mm-hmm.
I do think that Pesci's going to be the more likely of the two to make it to free agency. I think Shea is probably going to, honestly, I feel like Shea might be cheaper than Pesci. Just Pesci is
I
so
think
good all
so.
around.
Specifically because of the right
Like
versus left thing.
yeah, yeah. So I think Shea might be the more affordable one. And if you look at their, just re-signed Chatfield, like you mentioned. So do they go with Burns Slavin as your top pair? Do they go Orlov Chatfield as your second pair? I don't know how they're gonna set it all up, but they have just it's just like God, that decor in Carolina is nuts. So they can just let one of them go,
Yeah,
please.
that's the thing. They can
Um,
let one of them go and be perfectly fine. If they let both of them go, maybe it'll be a bit sketchy, but I bet they'll figure it out anyway because they have such good coaching and systems over there. I totally
yeah.
agree with you that I think Pesci is likely to go to free agency because he's relatively young for a UFA at only 29, and
Hmm.
he's probably the best of all of the right D that are available. I think he's going to cash in. I think he's going to be like 6.5, 7 million on a long-term deal. I think everyone's going to be after him. So that's the reason I didn't put him on my list for the Sens is because I think he's the number one option, and I think
Yeah.
we would just get outbid.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, my list is purely just hope. But yeah, no, Brett Pesci being like God, I'd be shocked if he signs a deal under 7.5 by 8. Like I think a team's gonna genuinely or seven, I guess, 7.5 by 7 because free agency. So I think there's a team out there. I don't know if it's Ottawa, but I think Pesci signs a really, really big contract because like who's yeah, like you said, if he makes it a free agency, he is number one. He's the number one defenseman in free agency.
Yeah,
Unless Shea also makes it a free agency, then it's I guess it's a toss up between what your team needs between the two of them. But they're both so good. I wonder if a team maybe like makes a huge move and tries to sign both of them as their top pairing or something. That would be
that would
wild.
be crazy.
But I guess it all depends on what Gensel wants and what Carolina is willing to give him. Because I feel like just given the strength of their decor, like Gensel has to be their top priority, right? So we'll see how that all goes. But yeah, no, my one and number two are Pesci and Shea. Shea's just one of those players. I don't even know if I have like a good enough reason to love him as a player. I just every time I watch him play, I'm just like really, really, it's just really enjoyable. I just have a really good time watching him play. But as far as like, the Sens fan in me, Pesci is a much, much better fit.
Hmm. For the rest of my list, I feel like we could probably
Hmm.
go a little bit quicker on these guys because they're not like the top guys that are
Yeah, I
available.
only have one left anyway, so.
Do you want to finish yours then? Give me that last guy.
Sure, my last guy. I'm interested to know if this is on your list too. Is Matt Roy?
Yep, I put him as the third on my list.
Yeah, I got him at number 5.
He's a guy
So
that
just
I
to round it
don't
out,
I don't watch a ton of him because he's out on the West Coast. Sometimes I
yeah,
stay up late for West Coast games, but
East
not
Coast bias,
yeah,
East Coast bias.
not always Kings games. But he seems to have that physical game with a bit of puck moving ability as well. I feel like he's very similar to Artem Zub. So if like I think maybe this was on the Zub cast. I think I said like if you could just clone Zub, then we would be good.
Yeah,
Fitting that I said that on the Zub cast, but I feel like Roy would be pretty close to that.
yeah. I think Roy. I don't know where he slots in. If he's the only one on my list that I'm not like 100% like give him the top 4 spot, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I think Brandstrom and Roy could make for if Brandstrom's cool playing a bit more on the left side, I think that could be an incredible third pairing. In a perfect world, the Sens are gonna somehow sign Pesci and Roy, and trade Chychrun for Allmark, and then we're all gonna be
that's
celebrating at
that's
the
dream
cup
world right
parade.
there.
That's dream world. But yeah, no, Matt Roy. I mean, like if you stick him on the second pairing, a Roy and Shabbat pairing could be great. That could be fantastic. He like everything that I've seen from Roy based on like whether it's his, his metrics or whatever, like he just kind of feels like I don't want to say this negatively about Shabbat. He's like the anti-Shabbat. Like
Yeah.
whatever Shabbat's missing in his game, Matt Roy seems to have, and I think that would be a really, really solid second pairing. Even though I do think that with him, there's a bit of wiggle room where like if he is on the third pairing and like on the top PK, like I don't know if you maybe you probably wouldn't want to put him and Zub together. Like you probably want to split them up as far as the PK goes. But like if the PK is like a 1A, 1B type of thing. If you can give Roy like a bunch of ice time on the PK, because let's face it, this is the Sens. They're going to be on the PK a decent amount, and on the power play a decent amount. They hate playing 5-on-5. Um, I do think that like that gives you a bit of wiggle room. Kind of like what I said, like in that dream scenario where you acquire DeMello and then you like, have that wiggle room to move him down to the third pair if you can bring in someone else. Kind of similar there, but I do. I mean, I think there's room for him to be really solid on the second pairing as well. Um, I'm realizing now as I'm saying this is a really silly conversation where like the Sens defense is a nightmare, and I'm talking about like a great player to acquire, and I'm like, I'd like him on the third pair. I
Yeah, I'm
know how
like, who are you
ridiculous
going
that
to play
sounds.
ahead of him? Brantstrom on the right
Yeah.
side, maybe?
Someone else, or someone else. Sorry, I should preface that. I think he'd be a great third pairing defenseman if the Sens acquire someone else
If
to
they
go on the
acquire two
second
guys,
pair.
yeah,
Yeah.
that makes more sense.
Or if you can really just if you can really get a solid number of games for Chychrun on the right side in a row, I think if you stick with Sanderson-Zub, Shabbat Chychrun as a second pairing with Chychrun on the right side with that shot, and then a Brandstrom Roy third pairing would be fantastic. But
Yeah, I'm not opposed to that.
that's if they want to risk it and keep Chychrun, because the difference in what you get for Chychrun on July 1st and after the new year are going to be completely different. So it all
Definitely.
depends on, I don't know, if I'm Steve Staios and I'm not, and like I don't want to act like I know better than the people in charge. But like if I'm talking to Jakob Chychrun and July 1st he says, yeah, I'm not interested in extending, I might want to re-sign with you depending on how this season goes, I kind of panic and look for a move. Um, but I don't know. I genuinely don't know what the right move is there. But I'm glad to know that Matt Roy is also on your list.
Since I still have Money Puck open, I'm going to use it. Uh,
Cool. Yeah.
so the pairing of Gavrikov and Roy with actually just over a thousand minutes played,
Wow.
which is one
Okay.
of the most on this whole
Yeah.
list. Like the only guys ahead of them in terms of goal share that played more minutes was Hughes and Hronek, Ekholm, Bouchard, Morrissey, DeMello, which is pretty high like competition
Those
there.
are those are very top end pairs. Yeah. Yeah.
So with that many minutes of Gavrikov and Roy, do you want to guess where they rank in terms of pairings for the goal share? I'll say it's above Sanderson and Zub.
Am I giving you the goal
Guess like
share percentage
the ranking of
or
like
where they're at
top pairings.
in the
Yeah.
whole? Okay, Gavrikov and Roy.
Mm-hmm. Because it's
Ooh,
better. I'll
that's
say it's
tough.
better than I expected.
Oh man,
Maybe this was too hard of a question. I don't
this
know.
is a tough question. 'Cause I'm just trying to picture LA's roster, like how they're playing, like compared to, because like I don't know. I wonder if Talbot helped those numbers early on. Um, I'd put them at like just because of the way you're phrasing the question, it must be really good. I'm gonna say 12.
Pretty close. They're ranked 14th for this stat for the goal share. For the
That's
actual
impressive.
goal share, I would have to see if the expected goals is a little bit different. Maybe they outperformed or underperformed it,
Yeah,
but pretty good. I would not have expected that to be like a top 15 pairing in the whole league for that stat with tons of
yeah,
minutes played together too. I guess LA didn't mix up their D pairings at all, and those dudes played the whole
yeah.
season together.
Who
So
was who was Doughty's most consistent partner? Was it Anderson?
it was Mikey Anderson, and they were actually very high up on the list too. They were a few spots
Yeah.
below, and they also had over 1,000 minutes played too.
Jeez. Wow. Wow.
Oh,
Okay.
you know what? I just switched it to expected goals, and they're even better on expected goals. They're ranked eighth.
Oh. Oh, wow.
So the
Okay.
expected goals was 56.2%, and they outperformed it with
Man.
the actual goals getting 58%. So
God.
very
If
good
if
numbers there. Part
if
of
you can
that
put
could
Roy
be
with Shabbat, if Shabbat does bounce back and feels confident enough to be a little creative like we've seen him in the past,
mhm.
that could be a great pairing.
Part of it could be
Really
that
good.
Gavrikov is also a shutdown guy, so it's two shutdown guys paired together. But
Yeah.
sometimes when you do that, they can get caved in and they don't end up producing much offense when they're on the ice. But their goal share
Yeah.
is good, so they're still able to get the puck out of their zone and all that. So I feel like if you get Roy and you pair him with more of a puck mover, the numbers might be a little different, but they probably wouldn't come way down.
You wouldn't think, no. So
But yeah, he's a good
interesting.
choice. He's a good choice. I would give him like 4 times 4, maybe 5 million.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it'd be a really, really good, really, really solid choice. Let's see here. He's from Michigan. That scares me
Damn, he's gonna
because
go to
of
Detroit then. No.
he's gonna demand a
No.
he's gonna say you don't have to trade me, but you have to trade me here.
DeBrinket
Anyway,
is going to
sorry.
convince him to come to Detroit, and we're going to be ruined.
If any Red Wings fans are watching this, they are smiling ear to ear right now.
Damn. Well,
All right,
I have
let's get that rest of your list.
two more guys on my list. I put Sean
Okay.
Walker. I'm not an expert on this player, but just the fact that he was on the Kings before, and they moved him out because they had stacked defense.
Too many.
They
Yeah.
kind of moved him out because they had Matt Roy. So if they don't re-sign Roy, actually, that's going to be losing a couple of right-hand D in pretty quick succession.
Yeah.
And then he went to the Flyers, who were expected to be terrible, and he did really well for them. I think they were in a playoff spot when they traded him away, and they ended up completely tanking after that. So the fact that he was able to play such a huge role on that decor and have them in a playoff spot for most of the year, I really like that. But in terms of his playing ability, I don't know I'm not an expert on him. I know that he can move the puck. That's all I know, really. But he was highly sought after by teams at the deadline, and Colorado paid quite a bit to get him. So I think I would be
Yeah.
happy. I would be happy with bringing him in.
Yeah, I didn't include him just because I feel like he's the best free agent Colorado has right now.
Okay, you think they'll keep
Um,
him?
I think they will, just because if I go through the list of who else do they have to sign on defense, you've got Caleb Jones and Jack Johnson. Okay, well that's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Sean Walker's made the guy. On forward, they've got Casey Middlestat, who is an RFA, and they've got Cogliano, Jonathan Drouin, Brandon Duhaime, Joel Kiviranta, and Yakov Trenin. They've got 16 mil to work with. They could easily sign
That's true.
Middlestat, have room for Walker. So I didn't include him just because I feel like he is going to be re-signed by Colorado.
That's a good point.
Unless he thinks he's going to get an absolute like great payday and he walks, who knows? We'll see. Maybe he hits free agency and still goes back to Colorado. I don't know, but I don't know. I just think that because the way that Colorado's defense is currently built with McCarr, Taves, Girard, and Manson, if you can have Sean Walker as your like 4 or 5, that's nuts. So if they get him at a reasonable price, I think he's definitely sticking around there. But I like him on your list. I like him for
This is
sure.
an aside, but the Jonathan Drouin contract is going to be really interesting. 56
Yeah.
points in 79 games when he really wasn't doing much of anything for like the past 6 years before that. I'm curious to see how much money Colorado ends up giving him.
If he had a blast, he might just sign for 3.5 or something.
Mm,
Like I could see that happening.
that's an interesting one. So yeah, Sean Walker could potentially be re-signed, of course, by Colorado. I think you make a good point there. The last guy that I put, I bet you will never guess. I'm not even gonna make you guess. I'm just gonna say that before is I put Yanni Hakanpää from the Dallas Stars.
Really?
He's a little bit under the radar because I think he was injured for like most of the playoffs. I'm not sure if he played at all really. Um, he definitely didn't play against Edmonton. I know that for sure. But I specifically include him in the list as a cheaper option if we strike out on everyone else. I don't think he's a top 4D, but I would love to have him on our third pairing. I think he is basically if Hamonic was good. Um, a huge
Okay, yeah.
yeah, a huge hitter. He throws a crap ton of hits, and he's a pretty big guy. That's like exactly what I would want on my third defense pairing. If you had like him and Clevin together, and Clevin starts flexing his muscle at the NHL level and throwing the body around, that could be a really cool third pairing. But specifically, yeah, I don't have him as like a top 4 option. If he ends up in your
Mhm.
top 4, that's not ideal. But if you could
Right.
get
Yeah,
him,
yeah.
if you could get him for like less than 3 million, he's like a perfect third pairing D to me. And like for example, we were saying if you did keep Jakob Chychrun and played him on the right side, maybe Hakanpää is a guy to bring in as the number 3 right D. Or if you were able to get some other right D that's better and you still have a bit of cap room after, that's a guy that I would like to see brought in.
I really like that idea. So I did look at Dallas a lot, just because of Tanev. Um, and if they don't reassign Tanev, I mean they've got some contracts to give out. Pavelski announced that he's retiring, right? So they just have to deal with let's see here. RFAs, they've got Ty Dellandrea, Sam Steele, Thomas Harley, and Niels Lundqvist. So then they got Hakanpää, Derek Pouliot, and Chris Tanev as UFAs on defense. Matt Duchene, Craig Smith on up front. Scott
Duchesne,
Wedgwood, UFA and goaltending. So they've got 16 mil in cap space.
it's a lot of cap space, but I kind of think that Duchesne and Harley are going to eat up a good chunk of that. If
Oh,
they keep
Hartley should be at least, yeah, 5, right?
Harley's going to
Like,
be 5 mil plus, depending on how long the contract is. Maybe they bridge him.
yeah.
maybe they bridge him on 1 or 2 years for a bit cheaper, but if it's long term, it's going to be 5+ for sure.
Yeah.
Duchesne was already making, I think, 3 million, and he had a really good season for them. So if they want to keep him around, it's going to be a raise. It's probably going to be in the 5 million range as well. That's over half of that cap space left. But the thing is that Yanni Hakanpää wouldn't be making a ton of money. He would be in the 2 to 3 million range, I would say. So if Tanev walks, maybe they keep Hakanpää just to have that right defense depth and not lose both of those guys. But it is possible that they keep Tanev and then Hakanpää is the one that ends up going to free agency.
It could go either way. I mean, if you look at they sign Harley, you have a top four of Heiskanen, Lindell, Suter, and Harley. I forgot that Ryan Suter's still over there. I mean, Suter you probably would prefer on your third pairing. So, God, you put Suter. Imagine, yeah. I mean, that's just the Dallas defense. Your bottom pairing of like Hakanpää and Suter, and then you've got Heiskanen, Lindell, Harley, and Tanev as your top four. They might just want to keep all of them.
They could. Man, they definitely could.
That's tough.
They could like keep all of those defensemen and just kind of say screw Matt Duchesne and sign some cheaper forwards instead. Especially because they have, what's his name, Logan Stankoven coming up, who can play top six now. And Wyatt Johnson still has one more season on his ELC. Dallas looks good. Like, they were probably my favorite for the Cup going into the playoffs this year. They should be able to reload pretty well, even though Pavelski will be gone. Especially because, like, Pavelski was still a good regular season, but you could tell he wasn't really impactful anymore in the playoffs. So it's not like they'll be able to replace him, I think.
Yeah, if they have any cap space at all left going into free agency, I can't imagine they aren't a top 5 destination for most free agents.
Yeah.
So I don't think they'll have any problem filling any spots they have available in free agency. Wow.
Well, we're closing in on the 1 hour mark here. Lots to talk about with the defense. I will say the funny part is we could have talked even longer because we didn't we didn't even get into specifics of like mock trades for Jakob Chychrun, which I'm thinking is something that we'll do maybe before the draft yet. We can come up with a few mock trades for each of us and
I like that.
See what we think is good, what we think is potentially not the best. We could even look at some cap-friendly ones and see what other people are thinking for Jakob Chychrun trades. So let us know, if you made it this far into the episode, let us know in the comments if you'd like to see that, an episode on Jakob Chychrun mock trades, although we're probably going to do it regardless.
Yeah, I think so. I think that'll be fun.
But yeah, so look forward to that. That probably about does it for our Sens defense recap. I will conclude it by saying we listed so many goddamn players. If we don't even get one of the guys that we listed here, like that would suck. So Steve Staios, just get one of these guys, any of them, please.
Steve Staios, if you're watching, and I know you are because you're a big fan, just please just get someone who knows how to play defense, please. Please. That's all we're asking for. Yeah, so we'll leave it at that. But coming up next, we also have our forwards recap for the Sens. So look forward to that. We'll be discussing what we expect the forward lineup to be looking like for next year.
Yeah!